in tone therapy, we've got something that is both, we've created a space which is both safe and intriguing. So we can solve some of the discomfort problem with mindfulness meditation, and then we can also solve some of the boredom aspects of it.
Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jody Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. This is the first part of my interview with Michael Joly. My next guest is the founder of Solu, maker of n.o.w tone therapy, a sound meditation device. Before Solu, he designed a range of professional and consumer audio products for motion picture sound, home theater, and recording studio use. He has a background as a musician, an on-air announcer, and radio business development executive. But he's also been immersed in the study of metaphysics, focusing on the intersection of sound, listening, and consciousness. His name is Michael Joly, and you can find the n.o.w tone therapy system at nowbysolu.com. There's a lot to unpack here, but Michael's enthusiasm for audio and its proper use is something I really think you're going to enjoy hearing. If you're one of those people that's extremely sensitive to sound, I think this episode will validate and soothe you. I know Michael understands your pain. First off, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me because I'm really excited about this topic and, well, many topics we're going to cover here, but particularly I love that you are creating something for tone therapy that seems so very effective, and I love it. But I wanted to ask you first off, what's the earliest memory you have of sound and how that moved you?
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Jody. Earliest memory of sound. I think the earliest memory is hearing multiple foghorns playing at the same time up in Seacoast, New Hampshire, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So it's at the mouth of the Piscataqua River and the Atlantic Ocean. And on a very foggy day, I'm about 5, I think. And the fog was so dense that I could barely see the rental home that we were staying in 100 feet away. So it was a safe space. You know, I was nearby my home, but I was playing on this big rock that was shaped like kind of like an oval-shaped rock, and I'm only as tall as the cattails. And I'm playing a solo game of submarine. My dad worked at the Portsmouth Naval Yard working on submarines. So I got to, oh, what's Dad doing? He's listening to foghorns right now. And that, that memory, that multiple, coming from different directions, and the fog, and it's not a static sound because when the fog gets denser and thinner, it attenuates the high-frequency content of the foghorns more or less, so they can sound distant or close, and they're overlapping. And then and years later, when I discovered the music of Brian Eno, music for airports in particular, I realized, wow, I heard something like what Brian Eno is doing when I was a kid. That is quasi-random overlapping of simple sounds to make new compositions. And that's what eventually led to the tone therapy that you had mentioned.
I love it. Yeah. You also had mentioned that you have a background in film. I'm really interested to hear how this influenced you too. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, and not on what people think of film, like as an actor or a producer or a director. I spent 15 years on the much more plebeian but important side of exhibition sound. That is, when you go to the movie theater, there's a sound system there. And so I worked for a company that made motion picture exhibition sound systems. We competed with Dolby. And so I was doing product design work, compressors, noise reduction systems, making the optical soundtracks sound better in the theater. while still being compatible with the Dolby optical soundtrack noise reduction system. So, yeah, I spent a lot of time listening to the noise floor of optical soundtracks and the noise floor of magnetic tape. So I got really, really experienced at listening to nothing.
Okay, yeah. The sound of nothing.
The sound
Yes.
and I really kind of fell in love with the stillness and the purity. Really, it's like the lack of stillness. And this is an old John Cage experiment, the American composer from the 1950s on. John Cage went to an anechoic chamber. That's a place where there's no reflections in the room at Harvard, and just went in there to hear what it would sound like. And he said, "Well, there really is no silence. I hear my nervous system. I hear my blood pulsing. I don't know if he had tinnitus like I do. So there's always some sound, but it becomes, these sounds are less intentional, and there's just a beautiful ambient life that occurs at 60 dB below the program levels. The 1 millionth part of the sound is what a 60 dB down is. So when I did this work, I realized that, you can't be thinking and listening with intent attentively at the same time.
Interesting. Okay.
It's just not possible to do. You're either giving your full attention to what you're hearing, or you're thinking about it, or you're asking a question, or you're judging it, right? And all of this stuff is what we try to address in meditative practices. To accept that our thoughts are there and let them pass, and then experience what is beyond thought. So I put my 10,000 hours in of listening to nothing.
Yeah. I guess you learn a lot when you do that.
Doing nothing is really good for you.
Yeah. Well, it certainly stimulates the imagination, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, is that how you got interested in healing with sound, or what first drew you into that?
I think that there were two almost parallel paths in my life, but they were really a bit asymptotic. They were coming together very, very gently and almost imperceptibly. I've always been interested in metaphysics, that is the what is beyond the physical, what makes the physical appear, and
Sure.
in the way that it does, and then this interest in the physics of sound. So there were two nearly parallel. If you can picture I know what it is. When you see a picture of railroad tracks receding into the distance, they appear to be converging at a point.
Yeah.
So I think these two rails of interest, that is the physical and the metaphysical, came together about 5 or 6 years ago, when I rediscovered for the second time a book by spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And at that time, a big life change for me, physical health problems, a deep depression. And I discovered that the first time I had come across The Power of Now, I remember saying, "Oh yeah, Eckhart Tolle, he's one of those be here now guys."
Ah, okay. And just to explain to people who are listening, now is what you've called your tone therapy, right?
Yeah, it's in part homage to Eckhart Tolle. We call it now
Sure.
tone therapy, like the present moment. But it's
So
also
it's N.O.W, or
Yeah.
sorry, O.W, right? Like that's how
never
it's-
again.
Okay.
Never again
Yeah.
will I make anything that has an acronym for its name.
Okay.
You know how hard it is? It's really hard to type that out.
I imagine it takes a little longer than just typing out now.
That's like the grand joke of this thing, that it wanted its name to be so difficult that it would actually slow you down.
Well, I
and
guess you have
write.
to speak it then.
Yeah.
You just have to speak it. You can't type it.
Yeah. So the that interest, discovering the power of now, and
Hmm.
Eckhart's work, and really delving into that, and I really felt like, wow, this book is speaking to me personally. He wrote this for me. Well, these are common problems, the power of the egoic mind to take over to supersede the true self, and then. Um, about 6 months after I reconnected with the power of now, I went to Germany to go to the Frankfurt Music Messe show. It's like a NAMM show. It's like a music and gear,
Hmm.
musical instrument music gear show for Europe. It's a big show. It's like the CES but focused on musical instrument gear
Okay.
in Frankfurt. Wonderful show. And I went there just sort of to heal. Not to buy anything, not to sell anything, just to be in the wonderful playground of an amazing conference and trade show. And one afternoon on a Saturday or Sunday morning, I think it was Saturday,
Hmm.
after the show had finished, I was sitting outside at a cafe, and the Germans are crazy about these little cakes. They have these tiny little petite cakes
Uh-huh.
that they love. They're all very colorful little things. And I was sitting there having a coffee and a cake, and it was outside at the sort of the foot of the cathedral there in Frankfurt, and the bells were ringing for a long, long time. And it wasn't Sunday, so there wasn't a mass going on.
Hmm.
And it wasn't a holiday or any sort of feast day that I knew of, but it was going on for a long time. And I don't think it would be for a funeral. But whatever the cause was, the bells rang for, gosh, a solid 5 minutes. And then they slowly started to slow down. This is in a cathedral, there's a belfry with a lot of bells that they ring.
Hmm.
And they gradually slowed down. And as they did, I remember hearing two bells ringing, then one bell ringing, and then no bells. And now just the foot traffic on the street, German language, which I don't understand. Just the ambient sound. And then, like out of the movies, it was a gray day. And then, like out of the movies, the clouds parted, and then this beam of light came down. And I had this amazing experience of, like, I called it afterwards, my state of grace batteries getting charged.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a real Satori moment, and all of this happened within a 3-month period of kind of reconnecting with the power of now, and then having this experience in Frankfurt,
Hmm.
an audio experience. It's like an audio Satori experience outside the cathedral. And not long after that, this intersection of the metaphysical and the physical interest in the physics of sound, it came together, and I started to play, and it something came in as an inspired thought, revealing itself. So so tone therapy, the product, what we call tone therapy, really kind of emerged more as an inspired thought, rather than that the startup impetus. I need to disrupt a certain space
Uh-huh.
with this solution. No, it was really, I needed something for myself, for my own healing, in a way that would integrate. Right. I think I know that I had labored under a sort of disintegrated personality, like compartmentalized, and and um, and I find that with this work in sound, my most recent work in sound, that I'm feeling more integrated. That is, the spiritual and the physical all make sense within this
Hmm.
context in a way that it never had before. It was like, well, I need to go to my day job and be an audio product engineer, and then I can go out and make recordings on the side and ambient location recordings, which is really a more internal. It addresses internal needs. So I think, gosh, I just feel really blessed that these two, the metaphysical and the physical, have come together in the way that they have over the past 4 years.
Are you looking for ways to improve your company's or podcast's impact? You'd be surprised how powerful the use of an intentional audio branding strategy can be. Want to know more? I have a free downloadable PDF that gives you my 5 tips for implementing an intentional audio strategy at voiceoversandvocals.com/audio-branding-strategy. That location does ask to put you on a mailing list, just to send you updates on when the new podcasts come out. But if you really don't want to give your email out, I understand. Just contact me directly. My email is all over my website, and I'll make sure you get that PDF without needing to sign up anywhere. If you do sign up, though, you also get access to a resources section called The Studio, where I have videos, white papers, and PDFs, discounts from my guests, and snippets of audio from my guests that no one else gets to hear. So maybe it's worth your while. Totally up to you. And of course, if you're looking for voiceovers, you can get in touch with me about that too. Now, back to the podcast. I love that. Yeah, the interesting experience of hearing those bells, it kind of reminds me of the tone therapy you're doing right now, because doesn't it just make you focus on something else? Like,
Yeah.
Isn't that, and then when you're done, it's like you can breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah, exactly. It can be surprising, yet familiar. So there's, so I think a challenge that many people have told us that they have with the mindfulness meditation practice. Well, there's two that we've heard. One is that it's not a safe space to be in. It doesn't feel like a safe space to be sitting with stillness.
Okay. I guess if you're used to constant movement, it's hard to, slow yourself down.
Yeah, and if you have thoughts that are unexamined or are not welcomed, and you're not used to surrendering to a thought to let it pass, so it can be there can be a non-safe space associated with just sitting in stillness, and the other that we've heard is that it's boring.
That would be something I would say. That would be my complaint.
Just plain old boring.
Yeah.
So I kind of connected with the fact that I had a job. Being bored, being an audio engineer who was getting paid to listen to the results of what I had designed and built, that was not an option about being bored. It was just my job to pay attention, listen, make notes, test, measure, iterate, refine. The boredom didn't come into it. So, and it also was a safe space for me because I was used to listening. So we've in tone therapy, we've got something that is both, we've created a space which is both safe and intriguing. So we can solve some of the discomfort problem with mindfulness meditation, and then we can also solve some of the boredom aspects of it.
Well, I appreciate that part, definitely.
Well, there's different doors, People come into either of those two doors.
That's very true. Yeah. Oh, boy. So you have also said that that this tone therapy actually does heal. I mean, what exactly does it do when you're listening to this? I mean, you've told what problems you're solving to keep people listening, but what does it actually do for them?
Yeah, tone therapy conveys truth. And when you hear truth, as opposed to lies, there is a deep relaxation and acknowledgement of truth. I mean, we want to be in truth with ourselves, and we want to be in truth with people we're in relationship with. And when you're not, that's where the dis-ease comes in. So when we talk about healing, let me make the special case for what I mean by healing.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know that it heals broken arms. I haven't.
Well, no, I wasn't suggesting that. Yes.
Yeah. People
Mental
have
healing, I'm
mental
thinking,
healing, yeah.
Psychological, yes.
Yeah, but people do say that it lowers their blood pressure. So there's
Okay,
a lot.
and that could certainly help.
Yeah, if you go on Amazon and you do a search and you say like PTSD and blood pressure, like a lot of physiological things, conditions show up. But when I think about healing, I'm talking about the healing of separation.
Okay.
And the separation that occurs from within a person as they get caught up in their egoic self, that is the mind that is externally focused on judging and evaluating and analysis, as opposed to the true self, which is consciousness and aware of being aware. When you get separated from that, there is some dis-ease. And then this can manifest in the quality of your relationships. It can manifest in, it has physiological manifestations as well. So,
well, like high blood pressure.
yeah, like high blood pressure is one. Stress and anxiety,
Sure.
just all those physiological symptoms accompanying stress and anxiety. So I think tone therapy works because it conveys truth, and it provides a path to wholeness. And there's a couple of ways it does that. The tones are specially tuned and referenced. So they're based on the harmonic series, and the harmonic series is just simply the number sequence that precedes 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And in sound, if you strike if you pluck a string, a tension string, let's say that string has a fundamental, the lowest tone of that string is tuned to 100 hertz, let's say 100 vibrations per second. As you pluck that string, a harmonic series is generated, and that harmonic series is generated in the ratios or in the series of 100, 200, 300. Now, those first three terms are really, really powerful metaphysically because you have, well, first of all, it's true. It's just like that's how God made it.
Okay, so that's what you define as truth. Because I was going to ask you, like, what do you mean exactly by truth? What truth?
Yeah. That when you pluck a string or you blow across a bottle, the sounds arise in whole integer form. 1, 2, 3. And then the ratios of those integers, 1 to 1 is the unison, 2 to 1 is octave, 3 to 2 is the perfect fifth. So now tone therapy uses tones derived from the harmonic series in the very low order of these ratios. There's a lot of unison in tone therapy. There's a lot of octave relationship, and there's a lot of perfect fifths heard. And when you hear these perfectly intonated, this is not an equal temperament tuning system like what you would hear in a piano. That's a piano keyboard. Modern piano keyboard is set up so that you can play across and modulate from key to key, and some of the intervals on a piano keyboard are slightly out of tune from the harmonic series intervals to facilitate the performer or composer being able to make music that modulates from key to key. So what we're talking about is really a Pythagorean tuning, which is a purely harmonic-based tuning. And when the body hears that, something happens like there's an ancient memory that goes, whoa, that sounds familiar. I don't hear that very much anymore, but I know that that's where I come from.
And the minute you said that, I went to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Like, I just, don't ask me why, but I was like, whoa. Okay.
Did they have a sound show or a sound segment?
Well, they are trying to write the perfect song. So, yeah. So, anyway, I don't mean to interrupt. But so this would be like a purity then. So that's kind of what you're equating to truth?
Yeah. Here's another truth. Here's another truth, and then here's how it gets embodied in tone therapy.
Okay.
There is a truth that all forms in this world arise from nothing. Before the form was here, I'm looking at these cat food containers right on top of my desk here.
Okay.
That I was going to try to use these cat food containers as to lift up my laptop and allow some more fresh air to flow, but it didn't work too well. And I think and I was worried about cooking the cat food.
Okay.
So,
your cat wouldn't be happy.
Yeah, he likes it cool. So these cat food containers, before they existed. This is like so obvious that it almost to be like stupid, right? Before these cat food containers didn't exist, before they were here, they didn't exist. So they came from nothing, and then all the materials that were needed to form them came together, and then a process of molding and filling the food and putting the top on, all that kind of stuff. So it's a process to make something from nothing. Now, in our lives, we also emerge from where we had not been before, and now we're here. Our lives grow and change, and then there is a dissolution and a winding down, and then stillness again. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Mm-hmm. This is true of all forms, and of course, as the Buddha points out, it is our fixation on the impermanence of forms that gets us into trouble and it causes suffering. In
the case of that cat food can, it might last a lot longer than we anticipate. So that might sort of go against the grain there, but I get your meaning.
Well, they could sit out. They do have a shelf life, It says right here. I mean, now that's a very interesting point, Jody, because this form says 8/24/2022. And so after that, I mean, that's a form with a fixed expiry date.
Well, but that's the food inside, right?
Yeah, the plastics. Now we know that
that'll last forever.
Yeah, this is a problem with plastics. So the plastic should be made out of cornstarch, right? More of that stuff.
Yeah, that would have a shelf life.
Yeah. So that's another kind of truth that now tone therapy is a device that plays for only 3 minutes. It looks like two little loudspeakers. Each one has an on button. You reach over. First, you have the intention. You reach over. You press the button on. There's an intentional 2-second gap before the sounds start, before the tones start, and then the tones start to play and emerge and change and overlap. And then about 3 minutes later, they slow down like the church bells that I heard, and then
fading.
return. Yeah, fading, a long fade at the end, and then they return to stillness again. So we have in this tone therapy device a little analog model of a life cycle that is nothing, into which nothing comes a form. The form changes and evolves, and then the form goes away and returns to stillness and nothing again. And then,
I see. So a fundamental truth for us as human beings.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah. So tone therapy, because if it can be experienced in only 3 minutes, like a pop song. So that's another reference. So I grew up listening to AM radio pop music, and like the 3 minute time form, is really kind of seared into me.
Yeah. Our attention spans seem to have been tailored to be that long.
Yeah, I'm working on some 30-second tone therapy stuff now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we have a hunch that there are certain contexts. I can't talk too much about this on the advice of my intellectual property lawyer, but
Sure, yeah.
there are certain contexts in which it would be helpful that if in a group meeting, if the group could voluntarily give themselves over to a shared listening experience for just 30 seconds, maybe a minute.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I know that you did that a couple of times with Podfest.
Oh, yeah,
And
right. So,
yeah,
right.
like we had moments of stillness and listening to the tone therapy, which I think for a lot of people they were really impressed by how nicely it started off their day.
Yeah, this is when people come together to give their attention, intentionally come together to give their attention. That's a very powerful moment, and this is why people love to go to concerts.
Yes.
Right. Well, there's many reasons I want to go, but also to have a group experience, and they're willing to do this. There's a suspension of disbelief. You're all in this together. In fact, there's an organization called the IONS, which is the Institute of Noetic Science. This was founded by the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who was I think he was the sixth person to walk on the moon, Apollo 14. So he came back and had some sort of spiritual experience in the command module on his way back, and then began a serious inquiry into the intersection of a science and spirituality, and started this organization. So to this day, now over 40 years, they're exploring that intersection. And they did a very interesting experiment at Burning Man a couple of years ago. They used a software device called a random number generator. Mm-hmm. This is a device that is, once you start it, it just makes a continuous string of numbers that have no relation, no correlation to the last number or the next number, just purely random. And it's just like noise. If you were to listen to the output of this thing, it would just be like, just noise. Not a pure tone. A pure tone is a very, very correlated, focused sound in one particular frequency. So they set up these random number generators around the Burning Man site, and then had them running, leading up to and then just after the big burn of the man, and then they analyzed the data. The output of these random number generators, and found that leading up to the burn and just after, that the random number generators had become slightly more correlated. Their output became slightly more correlated, that is, had an identifiable signal, distinct from the background noise. And the supposition is that you've got a bunch of people all focused on the same event at the same time, and they're actually influencing something mentally that should have continued to be a purely random event.
I know that we're all dealing with a lot of stuff these days, so I particularly wanted to acknowledge those that have taken the time to leave honest reviews of this podcast, like Elaine Grant, who called the show insightful, practical, eye-opening. As a veteran public radio producer and host, she says, and now an entrepreneur running a podcast consultancy, I thought I knew about the world of audio. Truth is, I knew just a small slice of this big and important world. I've learned so much from every episode. I need to re-listen and furiously take notes. I can't recommend audio branding highly enough. Thank you for taking the time to leave your comment, Elaine. It means so much to me. And now, back to the show. Wow. So humans together can make sense out of chaos.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, yeah.
Kind of interesting.
That's healing.
Well, we see patterns, right? That's what we do.
And we love to look for patterns, and patterns are they're both surprising and they're comforting.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so hearing the tone therapy then is making sense out of the chaos.
Yeah. Because we talked about the harmonic series, so you're hearing the harmonic series, so that's one making sense. The other is you're hearing a life cycle in sound in just 3 minutes.
Sure.
And then there's this low frequency pulsation that happens. Brainwave scientists would call these brainwave entrainment frequencies. They're
Yes.
low frequency pulsations that can drive or induce a similar response in the brains of the listener. So there are a number of laboratories that have studied the brains of Tibetan monks as they're meditating to look at the brainwave frequencies, or what frequencies are present, what are the amplitudes of these frequencies, and they can generalize that. Well, while doing a certain type of open monitoring meditation, these Tibetan monks produced a lot of theta range and the amplitude of such and such that is distinct from, again, background noise. It's a correlated effect. So now tone therapy has, through the use of pulsating amplitude pulsation of the tones themselves, can induce or drive a sympathetic response in the brain. So it gets you into an open monitoring meditative state more quickly than you might be able to get to yourself. And some experienced meditators have told us that it gets them to a place in just 3 minutes that they would normally take 30 minutes of decompressing and coming into their center and
Deep breathing.
deep breathing, other focus methods.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of this, and I've certainly talked to people who work with binaural beats and other tones and things like this that are meant to help people reach different levels of consciousness, I guess. So it's really interesting to see this in an actual physical thing that you can like put on your desk and turn on. Like, I love that.
Yeah, thanks. It's that's another thing. We wanted to help people take a little bit of time away from a break from screen time and a break from the phone.
Oh, especially now. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's so old school, and this I think this probably goes back to my experience as a working with audio products and designer of audio products, that I love the sort of one knob, one function, analog, old school relationship.
Yeah.
Not pull down menus.
Yeah. Way too much to choose from.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of choice.
Yeah. That said, though, I'm curious. Are you ever going to add more than one tone to your now product?
We are. We're pretty far along the path of a line. I'm not going to call it a pivot, but because we're committed to now tone therapy, the hardware product. But we're doing a line extension that would be software as a service, either a streaming service or a downloadable app. And that will be differentiated from now in a couple of ways. One is that it will have some additional tones that complement the original now tone therapy tones. And it can have a user selectable duration. And that's something,
I see. Okay.
Yeah, that's
so you
something
could lengthen the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, but it'll still be that same very pure, simple sine wave bell-like timbre, and a somewhat restricted vertical pitch range. So that'll be similar. But what will be different is there'll be a little bit more deeper tones, and then an adjustable user length. We were really committed to the idea that this 3-minute experience, that you could experience a complete life cycle of emergence of form, changing form, dissolution of form in 3 minutes, and then start over, because there's a comforting okayness about that.
Well, it doesn't take too much out of your day, and you can just experience something without needing to do anything.
Yeah. And then at the same time, I do respect that people have said, I have a meditation practice or a yoga practice, and I would really like to use this. Will you please consider putting a switch on it that makes it longer?
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that with the hardware product. I want to honor what the hardware product is and have it always be that way, like a work of art. We're not going to go and change, revise a historic work of art, but we can make
Sure.
new ones. We can make
Yes.
new ones. And then the software version of that will answer some of those questions in a way that, answer some of those listener requests in a way that I think honors both the request and honors what had come before.
Yeah, I really like that idea. Yeah. You had also mentioned that you were in the process of trademarking some of your iconic tone therapy clips, right? Now, was
Yeah.
that for the app or was that for the hardware? And how is that going?
This will be for the software as a service,
Okay.
and then any advertisements that we do, like the splash screen at the end of a video ad where the logo appears. Well, there would be like an Intel inside, boom, 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 boom.
Okay. Yeah.
Something like, or the old-fashioned the Microsoft or Windows or Apple startup sounds, the lion's roar, the MGN lion. These are all
Sure. Yeah.
these are all trademark sounds. They're not protected only by copyright, which is one form of intellectual property protection, but a trademark, a sound, as it becomes associated with a particular use in commerce, can be protected itself as because it's identified with the brand.
So you're underway now doing that?
Yeah, we've got the sound. This Solu, the name of the company, Solu brand sound that represents the brand in sound. At this point, I have to just simply file the application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
I see. Okay. So that's underway.
Yeah, that's underway, and I believe it meets all the criteria for what a trademark needs to be, including its use in commerce.
Yeah.
Which is a key
And
one.
certainly it'll be used in everything you do, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been part 1 of our interview. I hope you'll tune in next week for part 2. Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time,